There is an evil alliance bankrupting America and destroying the lives of millions here and all over the world. And it has to do with these companies here: big oil, agricultural commodity traders, and companies involved in rebuilding damaged infrastructure after and during war, along with the big banks and the weapon manufacturing companies like Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and others. So take a good look at all these companies here, because these are the puppet masters of war. These companies are responsible for using our government against us to perpetuate endless wars so they can all get richer and richer together off the backs of the American working class. Now, how are they doing this? Well, let me explain. You see, big, large private companies like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Boeing, and others who create weapons hold monopolies over creating weapons. And these companies lobby endlessly to bring politicians to power who will advocate for war. Why? Because war drives the government to buy more weapons. Weapons and equipment which Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and others then sell to our government. Our government then arms our military and geopolitical allies with these weapons continuously, and these companies continuously profit greatly from it. But because ammunition, weapons, vehicles, planes, and all the instruments of war are very, very expensive, our government cannot afford to just continuously buy all this stuff outright. So how does our government afford to buy all these weapons of war continuously from these private companies? So just like us, they have to go to the big private banks. So now you got the big private banks like Bank of America, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, and others who quickly step in to lend this money to our government with interest, of course, so they too can profit greatly from wars, which we have to pay with our taxes. That's how the government pays for things, with our taxes, by taxing us. And we're all collectively paying about $1 trillion a year on interest payments alone with these debts to these private banks. Think about how crazy that is. So obviously, it's in the interest of the big private banks and the weapon makers to fund politicians to power who will advocate for war relentlessly, because these guys will make billions to trillions in the process, all paid for by taxing the American working class. And we can't forget about large private reconstruction companies like Bechtel, KBR, and others either, because they lobby the government to rebuild war-torn regions. Let's take Gaza, for example. What's left of Gaza, the same people who lobbied the government to rebuild Iraq and other war-torn regions are at it again, aiming to secure multi-million-dollar to billion-dollar contracts to rebuild all this destruction that we've witnessed throughout Gaza. KBR, Bechtel, the same people. We see destruction, they see money. And do you know who's going to pay them this money? We are. Of course we're going to pay for it. That's why they lobby the government for war. These are the immediate puppet masters of war. But there are some others as well, like the massive agricultural commodity traders. These groups are known as the ABCDs, and they greatly profit from war as well. You see, the US is one of the largest exporters of food in the world. And these companies basically own that process. They own the ports, the farms, the ships, the supply lines, the whole thing. And these guys love war, because when nations like Ukraine who export food get attacked, their food production gets destroyed. And this disrupts global markets. And because the ABCDs have the food, the ports, the ships, and all the supply lines to move this food all around the world, they can charge crisis level fees and deliver this food to the markets that are disrupted by these wars. So it's also in their interest to bring politicians to power who will advocate for war, because war creates market disruptions for food, which they exploit for profit. Big oil does the same exact thing. As you can see, since the start of the Ukraine war, American oil giants have taken in about $380 billion in profits. Because when oil-producing nations like Venezuela, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Iran, or others get attacked or their markets get disrupted, it is the American companies who swoop in to sell those markets, to be the sole provider of oil. And when this happens, they all raise their prices together to profit as much as possible, which is what they have done and what they do time and time again. Not only that, but when we help a nation win a war who has access to oil and gas reserves, we force those governments to hand those rights over to the American oil oligarchs so they can control those resources and the cheap labor in those countries. And this isn't only the case for Ukraine. It's actually been the case for almost every country we have invaded or started a war in where oil fields have existed. So yes, big oil has also been a major contributor of political lobbying for war as well. I mean, we're currently witnessing right now politicians and oil giants working hand in hand to manufacture consent to go to war with Venezuela, because they have the largest reserves of oil in the world and they won't let us have it. Make no mistake, these are the puppet masters of war. This is the military industrial complex. These people are funding politicians and politicians are doing them favors. And these favors come at the expense of the American working class, their lives, their taxes, and the lives and money and taxes of other nations who have to pay for all the destruction that we are causing for these companies to rake in billions of dollars. It's honestly sickening. Now, can this profit-driven alliance between the weapon makers, the big banks, and the resource corporations be stopped? Of course it can be. First, the defense industries like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Boeing, and others need to be nationalized completely to end the profit incentive behind war. Secondly, the big banks need to be nationalized completely, all of their assets and property, so that credit and investment can be realigned to serve the interest of the American public. This ends the incentive for the big banks to lobby endlessly for things like war, which require large government borrowings with interest that we don't want to pay for. This also stops them from depriving credit and loans to public sectors that are moving away from the for-profit model, which they would most certainly do to sabotage it. Therefore, nationalizing the big banks is at the forefront of this issue. Thirdly, big oil, the ABCDs, and the reconstruction companies all need to be nationalized as well. Because if we bring the entirety of our economic heights under democratic and public control, we can remove the foundational capitalist incentives for market disruptions and resource wars to begin with. And that would change the driving force of our economy and foreign policy from a bloodthirsty imperialist war machine to a system that's based on human needs, human development, and public service. And that would set the foundation to a government of, by, and for the people, ending the capitalist alliance that is destroying the lives of millions all over the world for capital accumulation. And the only way we'll even start a process like that is by removing money and politics completely, which is the most important political hurdle of our lifetimes if we ever aim to have a government of, by, and for the people, which is something I'll go over in the next video, so stay tuned.